He's got several marriages, quite a huge number of children. Where does he, or for that matter others, who aren't as encumbered as him, return after all these years from prison or from exile? They have no property, they've got nothing in the bank, they don't have a bank account. Where are you going to find a roof over your head?
Personal problems get shunted aside, for the high-risk negotiations take center stage. Disputes between the ANC and the Zulu Nationalist Party, nkandla, confound the negotiators. While South Africa goes to the vote in 1994, Zuma's home province grapples with unprecedented levels of violence between warring sides, the ANC and nkandla.
More than 400 of our leaders, whose names I can give you, were killed during that violence, let alone thousands of members who died in that war.
Unlike maybe in other places, you had a huge mass-based organization like nkandla, which was against the liberation movement and became a very useful tool in the hands of the apartheid regime to actually basically wage a war.
We didn't have an army. They came with an army, because they had a trained army which was meant to take on the South African Defence Force. And it's nonsense now to say we're collaborating with the apartheid regime.
The difference of opinion and ideology appears intractable. The recurring violence enflames an unstable situation.
This period of violence in KZN, then Natal, needed to be diffused. People from our side, the Harry Gwalers, the Blade and Zemandes were calling for arms and weapons. I'm linking with them to provide weaponry. Not going against the ANC, I'm working for Mandela and the top leadership, and they are asking me to continue to provide weapons for what we then developed was the self-defense units.
In 1995, the country went on to local government elections, but KwaZulu-Natal was left out because it was so violent, you couldn't do anything. And at the back, the ANC and the IFP was starting to do some, negotiations. As we're moving into this thing, we're to continue now to quell the fires and the flames of violence all the time. And he was at the center.
Zuma could relate to the king. He could even relate to the IFP leader better than anybody else, although they wouldn't agree politically. But they both knew they were talking as two Zulu leaders.
Zuma's personal charm helps him strike up a relationship with Frank Mdlalose, the IFP lead negotiator.
We were in the leadership of our two organizations. And the most important part of us was solving the issue of the war between Zulus and Zulus, say between black and black in KZN. We worked for peace, and that's when I found Jacob Zuma to be a good man in terms of working for peace.
He was an expert, if I may use the word, understanding the peasant mentality, the rural people's mentality, because he has of his own history, understanding the tradition and so of the chiefs.
So we needed to move into the cultural mode to be able to relate at a level where there will be no questions asked and there's a degree of trust that can be built before we discuss politics. When there are any events, we would go out there and wear our traditional regalia, and it paid well because suddenly we had access to a lot of people who we could relate to without discussing politics. And when that happened, suddenly it changed the whole situation. It also helped to advance the whole peace thing around the ANC and IFP.
Zuma's ability to harness the traditions of his rural childhood helps to finally deliver peace to this troubled corner of South Africa.
He got the job in KwaZulu-Natal as an MEC. I thought he's now a provincial player. And of course, his catapulting back into the national scene was because Thabo Mbeki had wanted Mr. Buthelezi to be the deputy president, and Mr. Buthelezi refused. Thabo Mbeki couldn't find somebody else, and he then was forced to take his own number 2 in the organization. But at that time, there was an understanding that that was a placeholder. He was not going to be going anywhere beyond that position. And even Mr. Zuma himself at some point issued a statement out of nowhere to say he has no ambitions to be president or anything.
There was a story that there was a plot against Mbeki, and Steve Tshwete even announced it on the SABC, and Zuma was allegedly one of the plotters, and the other plotters had to sign apologies, and I don't know. Mbeki took offense, and then Zuma's legal troubles started, not related to Mbeki, but he was running short of money.
Our people were easy pickings for those scoundrels who were on the lookout to ingratiate themselves and to come to the fore and to start paying bills. And he fell into that trap.
A Durban businessman, Shabir Sheikh, one of a family of MK veterans, assists Zuma financially. But then Sheikh's business dealings make him the first casualty of South Africa's notorious multi-billion rand arms deal.
I mean, surely, I think that it was a corrupt thing. It was really corrupt because all of us were promised that there were going to be a lot of jobs for people and so on. But in fact, that never happened. In the meantime, a lot of people got very rich, because they were bribed by these companies, that wanted to sell arms to South Africa.
Shabir Sheikh goes to jail for corruption. Zuma is implicated in the hard-hitting judgment.
If Zuma could not repay in money, how else could he do so than by providing the help of his name and political office, as and when it was asked? Particularly in the field of government contracted work, which is what Sheikh was hoping to benefit from.
The judge there, Hilary Squires, in finding Shabir Sheikh guilty and sentencing him to 15 years, says words to the effect that there's been a corrupt relationship between him and Zuma, and Mbeki asks him to resign. Zuma refuses. So Mbeki has to basically fire him.
It would be best to release Honorable Jacob Zuma from his responsibilities as Deputy President of the Republic and member of the Cabinet.
I was not convinced of the corruption charges against Comrade Zuma, not because he was my friend, both of them were my brothers. And when it became clear that they were parting ways in the most vicious way, I spent a lot of time crying, because it was almost like a breakup of my own family.
I was very sympathetic to Mr. Zuma too. In fact, I don't know how to put in English, but even up to now, if you ask any African, they'll tell you that I used a Zulu adage that you must never laugh at another man's wound, because tomorrow it will be you.
I, however, still maintain that I have been treated extremely unfairly throughout the entire debacle.
The day that it was announced, I went to sit with him, and I was amazed at his calmness.
Yeah, and we went to Oliver Tambo House, which is the house of the deputy president, and we found him, like we came in, he was like, couldn't see him behind boxes and boxes because he was packing, and going. So we sit down, he says, hey, Bafana Bagit. He talks like that, which means homeboys, to everybody, hey, Bafana Bagit. I think it's time for me to go to Nkandla and look after my cattle, and just sit with my children.
But Zuma is then hit by a rape charge. His supporters turned the court appearances into political rallies, piling pressure on the woman who makes the case.
For justice to be seen to be done.
It's a young woman who's called Kwezi. She's about 32 2 at the time, daughter of a very close comrade of ours. Jacob Zuma and I see him often. I'm now Minister of Intelligence all these years later. She's come to see me on one occasion. She's openly gay and she's openly HIV positive. Suddenly she contacts me and says to me, Jacob Zuma's raped me, and I can't believe my ears.
Zuma is now embroiled in a saga of infidelity to his 3 wives in a bitter courtroom battle that shreds his reputation. But his supporters remain true to the revolutionary from Nkandla.
If you take the rape case, there was no way that somebody like him who was out of government would have been able to amass the kind of intelligence that tracked down all the people that the woman had ever accused of anything, just finding the information and even finding the people wherever they were and then bringing them to court to come and destroy that woman could only have been done with access to intelligence. There is no doubt that Mr. Zuma uses the intelligence structures to good effect.
In my judgment, the state has not proved the accused's guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The accused is found not guilty. And this is
When that whole thing of persecuting him started, both COSATU and the SACP were fully briefed about what are the problems, you know. And we really understood what was going on, you know. Partly also that is why we came out to say, but we can't allow Zuma to be treated like this, because what we saw was actually abuse of state institutions against him.
Mr. Zuma was then able to bring together the wounded, the Youth League, the COSATU, all of those, the communists. They all rallied around this man. Some of them not because they liked the man, but because they disliked the guy that he was wanting to fight.
We had a broader new agenda that was beginning to capture the ANC, want to turn it into a modern parliamentary political party with a very problematic economic policy in the form of gear, you know, which was a neoliberal economic policy, with a very problematic approach towards HIV and AIDS denialism, which cost us thousands and thousands of lives. I would say that is what was the problem.
Battle lines are drawn in the months before the ANC's national conference in Polokwane. Leadership positions are fiercely contested.
Mbeki was becoming remote, and this coalition of the disaffected, with Zuma strategizing and very clever at this, was able to tip the scales, and we saw the result 60-40 at Polokwane, and the rest is history.
After the ANC wins the 2009 elections decisively, Zuma triumphs as South Africa's 4th democratically elected president.
I, Jacob Zuma, swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa. So help me God.
I think it's an absolute lovely slogan. No secrets. No lies. No more power.
The fallout is a defining element of President Zuma's later years. His old comrade, Ronnie Caswell, actively campaigns against new laws that might stifle a free media.
Look, the media's been hard on Zuma. I'm not surprised that he's responded angrily. I don't like it when he brings the secrecy bill. That's part of avoiding accountability. And that's the big weakness. This man won't take responsibility for things that go wrong on his watch.
I think that the ANC has become more and more rotten, and therefore I'm very interested in seeing the new forces in this country which look towards socialism as the solution.
Possibly the most colorful politician Zuma has alienated is his erstwhile ally, Julius Malema. The populist has put a new party in parliament, but Zuma is still very much in charge, settling in his new and large cabinet.
The loyalists are loyal to him because they're dependent on him. They owe their jobs to him. He's put them in those jobs not because of their abilities, but because of their loyalty to him. And therefore you'll hear many people say what a great leader he is and all the rest. But I don't buy that one.
Among his chosen are comrades with whom he forged bonds of trust over decades, fighting a common enemy from exile.
South Africa will record the Zuma years as a consolidation of democracy. I think that they will gauge Zuma years as reconnection with the people. They do understand that we are part of their history, and he has kept that.
This administration has invested R1 trillion into infrastructure, the highest ever perhaps in the history of this country. He has been leading that. In other words, he has been trying his best to ensure that in his leadership he ensures that ANC policies are delivered. Life expectancy has increased under him because we abandoned that crazy position of AIDS denialism. He drove that.
I think it's extremely difficult to run a country. Ask me, I've been in government for 9 years. It is not easy. He is the president of a very broad mass organisation which has to hold together. Unity has always been the key that underpins everything the ANC does. And as president, he has to speak for all South Africans. He has to act in the interest of all South Africans. That isn't an easy task.
South Africans hold mixed views on the president's record. This mocking portrait was a national talking point, even before Zuma's supporters weighed in with their tins of paint.
There is also a view of him as someone who seems incapable of seeing corruption that is staring him in the face as wrong. There is the womanizing in a way that is problematic for a lot of people, not only at the level of polygamy, but even infidelity within polygamy. So the rape case, the sonono, and the child.
He does believe in looking after his children and owning up to them. The downside is that to the ordinary South African, there are too many, and it is not right, and they judged him in relation to their own understanding of what is right and wrong and morally acceptable.
Hi, Daddy. Happy birthday. So there are 21 of us. I am probably slap bang in the middle somehow. I mean, we're all very close, especially the siblings. Ever since I was small, family functions have been a huge affair. Lots of fun, lots of laughter, lots of food. Yeah, very entertaining.
Zuma's family home, with its familiar traditions, provides a retreat from the pressures of office.
Well, Nkandla is his home, it's who he is, it's where he's himself. He loves going there, he's there as much as he possibly can be. It's in the heart of a very rural, impoverished area, and my dad came from there, and now this is who he is. And so it kind of, for me, symbolizes the story of South Africa.
But even President Zuma's home is under scrutiny.
Did the Honourable President receive this letter from the Department of Public Works? And when he received it, why did he not immediately intervene to prevent this outrageous expenditure of 206 million rand on a project at his private home in nkandla?
Much of his energies have been devoted, A, to warding off court action against him and the prospect of imprisonment, and to avoiding prosecution. It really has consumed his energies and whatever creative skills he has.
The suggestion that his house was built by government really got onto him the wrong way, you know. To say that you can say everything, but no government has actually built my house.
The poverty around Nkandla can only be a constant reminder of the formidable task of building South Africa's economy. Zuma's government is up against low growth and massive unemployment.
You know, he would make promises here in Parliament. He would say he's going to create 500,000 jobs. And in fact, that year we lost 1 million jobs. So I said to Mr. Zuma, in fact, our people, if you tell them the truth, they'll persevere because they are very patient. But if you promise them, you know, an El Dorado which you can't deliver, I think that's a very dangerous thing. But he keeps on doing so.
Of course, there is a big challenge on the economy. We're all agreed that structural unemployment in South Africa is very high. We have to tackle that. Poverty and inequality, we actually have to tackle that. Yes, maybe there are certain things that government could have done better alignment of policies, but not all of that is as a result of this government.
Bearing in mind the kind of economic quagmire that the world finds itself in, both theoretically and in reality, there's no perfect answer. It's by really engaging with your own context, your own history, and your own structural environment, and being creative about it, which will ensure that you can come up with the right kind of answers.
He's neither a leftist nor a rightist, because if he ever were to take one course of action, he'd alienate the other wing. And so he's done neither. And the country has drifted along rudderless, and it has deteriorated seriously, economically and socially, and in terms of morale, I believe, and certainly in terms of morality.
And the media has been most unkind to Comrade Zuma. And they have used his weakest points and blown them out of proportion.
Most of the media in South Africa is adrift. It's not President Zuma who's adrift. They just don't understand South Africans and what's going on.
Disappointed by government, the powerful national